We'll call the regular meeting in New Ulm City Council for 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, August 6, 2019 order. First item on the agenda is consent agenda items.
I'll offer a motion to approve those.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Any discussion on any? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. This time we're gonna jump ahead, new business 7.2, and that will end up letting John Burmeister come up here and explain our bonding.
Thank you, John Burmeister with PFM. Earlier this morning, the city solicited proposals from underwriters on the purchase of its annual general obligation bonds. And then there's also another item on your agenda, 7.3, that has the printout of the credit rating. We're pleased again to say that the Moody's did reconfirm your AA2 rating. And then if you've looked at the report, there's some new information that I think is kind of valuable and interesting to look at. It's on the back page. They've been opening up their kind of what I'll call their black box and trying to figure out how they determine your overall rating. And some of you may recall over the past few years I've said that the city's rating is very high for a community this size. And they actually break this out on the very last page. Your market value of the community is about $1 billion. And that's in the A category of all of the other ratings for that size of a community. So the fact that you're a AA2 for your size is a great thing for the city. And what's really holding that up, if you look at the components, is the strong financial performance of the city. It's specifically the general fund, the budgeting that you do. It's the strong general fund balance that they are identifying. They compare that across cities across the United States. They are categorizing you at about a AAA, which is the strongest rating for purposes of your financial performance. That is really one of the keys that's holding up your AA2. So keep up the good work on your financial budgeting. Keep the strong general fund balances because that's being heard. It's being reflected in your rating. And that's also ultimately filling into the bond receipts, proposals that we received this morning. We ended up getting 7 proposals from underwriters. And today was the largest week of supply of municipal bonds throughout the year. So the fact that we received 7 bids, I think I was pretty pleased with that. If you look at the results of sale, you can see Robert W. Baird, and they came in at a true interest rate of a 1.4403. For those of you following the blow by blow in the market, interest rates have been falling dramatically over the last year. They're down 1% since last November, and they've been falling significantly in the last few weeks. So good time to be a borrower. 1.44 is the true interest rate. This is a 10-year term, is similar to what you've done in the past. And you can see there's actually, I counted them up here, there's 28 different underwriters fighting over your bonds with the Robert W. Baird bid. And if you flip to the back couple pages, you can see BNY Mellon, they came in at a 145. Fifth Third came in at a 145. Piper Jaffray came in at 148. So pretty close bidding results. So I was pleased to see that. And then the high bid was a 159. So good results on the bidding. We're very pleased with the interest rates. Your timing is great. As you know, the Fed just reduced interest rates a quarter of a percent last week. So a good time to be in the market to take advantage of those because that is now priced into this market, and you guys directly benefited from that. So with that, I'll open up to any questions that you might have.
This has to be probably the lowest rate I've seen.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but Steve, you don't recall anything lower. I think you had that better memory.
2016 was 122, as I recall,
Okay.
but that's the only one I had.
It's pretty
on the
close.
list.
Yeah, but we're getting
take
low
it.
again.
We'll take it.
Anybody have any more questions? No? Entertain a motion on that one? Or resolution?
I'll offer the resolution, waive the reading, authorizing the issuance, awarding the sale, and fixing the form and details for $4,210,000 general obligation permanent improvement revolving fund bonds, Series 2019, and authorize the mayor and finance director to execute the bond documents on behalf of the city of New Ulm to finance the 2019 CIP improvement projects.
Second.
We have a motion and a second off the resolution. Waived reading. Any more discussion? Seeing none? Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Item 7.3, Moody's Investment Service Bond Rating. John Burmeister. He covered it, right on. Okay, we don't have to do nothing, we just receive it. All right, thank you. So,
We do need a motion.
do we need a motion? Okay, entertain a motion.
To order that be received and filed? I'll offer that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries, thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll go on to public hearing. 2.1, public hearing for noise variance for the Lamplighter Sports Bar and Grill. And that's for Saturday, August 17, 2 to 10 p.m.
I received no comments or emails on against this.
I did. I received one phone call from a tenant at German Strassi, and then I received a letter from German Strassi. Both thought it was good till 9, but think 10 o'clock is too late. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else?
Do we have any concerns if this is gonna be held on the city's parking lot adjoining the property there, next to the Kiesling House? With that in the rear, at least from us?
Herb said he was going to fence off his parking lot because
Okay.
he has to control the alcohol to that property only because
Okay.
it's private property.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
One issue, and I've had some communications with the applicant regarding this. My understanding is that he intends on doing alcohol sales that would be outside of his licensed premises. And I think he was talking about using a caterer's permit. A caterer's permit allows the sales if the sale is incidental to a prepared meal. And I'm not sure what exactly his plans are there. You know, that's not a bag of peanuts. I don't know that it would be picking up a brat that might be available on site. I don't think he intends this to be a sit-down dinner. So that's something we need to talk with him about. We need to do something to control the use. There absolutely was a problem with the last street dance that's still being investigated, where there were possibly several hundred violations that went on during that. And if we're going to enforce our code and the laws, people are going to have to adhere to that. So this is strictly on the question of the variance for the noise ordinance, but there are some other matters that go along with these sorts of activities. So.
Thank you.
Anybody from the public? Be heard? No. So we had one call, a person who talked about, it wasn't a consensus from the apartment building.
The letter was from the apartment building.
It was.
And the call was from one of the tenants.
So do you want, are you gonna read the letter into the record?
It was just a note written on the letter that says, we would prefer not to have music after 10. Oh, it just says after 10, I guess.
After
9
10.
PM is long enough, it says.
Oh,
They're asking till 10.
right. So,
The variance is for until 10. But they're saying 9 o'clock is long enough.
I guess I don't see a problem with going to 10. I mean, it's just
It's one night.
one night.
Yeah. And it's not directly behind them,
Right.
you know, so it is down the street.
Yeah. And just one other note, I will say our code Monday through Thursday allows noise till 10. For whatever reason, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it's only 9 o'clock, which
Really?
doesn't make sense. But again, during the week, it's till 10, so this really isn't too far from the realm of what we already allow during a weekday when people are actually working.
We might have to tune up our code a little bit.
That's what I'm thinking too. We should make the note so we do get that one fixed when we go through that.
You know, we'll be approving it till the 10 o'clock issue. A question for the city attorney, did you want something added in there about that? I mean, we know there's gonna be alcohol served. with the control or
Well,
not?
that's not on the agenda.
Okay, okay.
That's something that, again, I can communicate more with the property owner applicant. But, I don't want him to have problems, I don't wanna mess up his event, but he's also gotta comply with the law. So, depends on how he plans to conduct it. But I don't think it would be appropriate to be wrapping that into your decision on this.
Okay.
This is just on the noise.
All right.
I'll offer a resolution, waive the reading to close the public hearing and authorize the noise variance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to offer the resolution, waive the reading. Any more discussion?
Is that till 10 then, or?
Till
9?
10.
All right.
Seeing none, Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Item 3.1, temporary on sale 3.2 malt liquor license. And that's for St. Mary's Church on September 22nd, 2019.
I'll move it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3.2, liquor permit for the Herman Monument Society, and that's for September 7th, 2019.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3.3, tree service license for Benick Tree Services LLC.
I'll move it.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3.4, raffles gambling permit for Deer Deutsches Longbeards. That's for the Wild Turkey Federation.
I'll move it.
So, second.
We got a motion and a second, and that's for Saturday, February 1st, 2020.
Wow, they're way early, aren't they?
Yes.
They're thinking ahead.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3.5, gambling permit for Church of St. Mary's, and again, that's for September 22nd, 2019.
I'll move it.
Move.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 4.1, a report from officers and board. The variance request from Alliance Bank address change.
Dave
ahead,
Schnubert,
Dave.
Community Development Director. The Planning Commission at their July 25th meeting considered a request from Alliance Bank to maintain their current street address at 322 North Minnesota Street at their new building location, which is situated on lots 12 and 13 of block 62 North. The street address at that location is 306 North Minnesota Street. The 306 address is based on the city's address plan, which has been in place. I think it predates me coming to the city.
What?
That goes back a ways then?
That goes back
a ways, yeah. The city hasn't issued a variance for this type of request in the time that I've been with the city. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval with one condition. The one condition was that the address change would take place with the occupancy of the new bank building, at which time the old bank building would have to take on a new address. So somebody's forms are going to change when this takes place. The reason for that is that the Alliance banking system in New Ulm serves as kind of headquarters for their system. They have 6 other banks, and this is a central location for documents and operations. And then another reason was that Alliance owns the entire half block, and they are simply moving within that half block area.
Thank you, Dave. So you're saying we should do a change since we haven't done one in a half a century?
Yeah. I'd like to just add, the Planning Commission met when we discussed this topic, and, we were toyed with whether we go with the 322 and work with city staff to designate, you know, the old bank to be 326 or 328? Or do we go with it and we don't have in our zoning, you know, like a campus type of umbrella for one single address like the college? We don't have that in our current zoning. So this gets us to, we'd be doing a variance to allow this under this. So we've never done it before, but again, maybe we have to look at our zoning, you know, for the future.
I agree. I see no problem with it.
I guess I don't see a problem with it. I mean, did have some contact from the historic people. A question for the city attorney. Okay, we've got, looking at the blueprint here, could this come back to haunt us or not?
That's my concern, is
Yeah.
do we have a future issue here?
Could there be a
Precedent,
future
or-
if Alliance decides to sell lots 8, 9, and 10,
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
and we've only got 24 through 26? I don't know if the planning,
Well, I think what the plan would be, as I understand it, is, yeah, technically you could have any number of properties there that all need addresses. And now you're going to have one block that's going to have different addresses than every other block in the city. So if a person knows where 322 should be, it's not going to be where it should be on this block. So that, I mean, but I guess if we just decide to, you know, assign addresses, we can do that. So I'm not aware that the US Postal Service, you know, controls that. But, you know, that's something where it's potentially an issue, just I think with confusing people, people are using GPSs, et cetera. You know, you certainly can do it. I understand the complications for the bank. Bank Midwest changed. I'm assuming they had to change things when they did their address change. So, I mean, you know, other businesses do this. It's part of the cost of doing business.
Yeah, and Bank Midwest that's just a branch. Their main headquarters is in Iowa, and so Alliance is stating that their headquarters is here, and they're consolidating 3 buildings to 1, and then their other 6 banks. So they have a lot of legal documents with all their loans and things of that nature. It's just, so it could be the cost of doing business, or do we do a variance and work with staff to designate the other, the former bank with a different address?
So Counselor Christian, I don't know if that answered your question or.
Do we set a, another concern that I have is, do we set a precedent for other future, because, and I never like the word precedent, because every situation is always different, but this might not be. We change an address, now we've opened up this door for people that come after us and say, well, you did it for that bank way back when.
Correct, because, I mean, it's a question of scope. And if this is the
Right.
central bank for this organization and they have other banks that are tied into that address, it makes it more complicated and expensive for them.
Right.
If you have, again, another Bank Midwest situation, they also have to change, you know, letterhead, and they have some expense in doing that. So at what point do you say, well, it's not too much for you, but it was for them?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue that comes up, and yeah, that is a precedent.
And let me just chime in for a second. You know, that this, to me, is just a very unique situation where they own an entire block. And speaking with Alliance Bank, you know, they understood if there was another building on that block that they were jumping, they would have to change address. If they were switching blocks, or if they're switching from odd, you know, even to odd, they would have to change their address. But, you know, this is a very unique situation where they own the entire block and they're just moving it up to the front, and there's not another address or another building there that's blocking that situation. So I think, you know, looking at it, it's a very easy fix, and you can always think of it as an incentive to keep the bank here. That doesn't cost us anything. You know, you're helping the business out by allowing them to keep their address, and it's an incentive that taxpayers don't have to pay for, and it's just moving them forward, and it helps their business out, helps keep them here, and helps keep a business local.
And I support that. I'm just worried that if they turn around and want to sell off 1 or 2 of these lots in a year or 2 from now we got the mess.
But we still got numbers available, so it's not really a big mess.
Yeah.
It's just to me, it makes sense just to do it and be done with it. I think we aren't creating a problem at all. It's the simplest thing to do.
You're setting a precedent, though.
We are, and
Yeah.
we have that right.
Yeah.
So we do.
Yeah, and then we could also look at our zoning for the future, that if we have, say, somebody that has an entire half of a block, we call it a campus.
Right.
You know, and there's nothing that says on a campus where that front door has to be,
Mhm.
similar to the MLC. So, or we could deny it and then come back and redo our zoning and then come back and start the cycle. So, I like the recommendation from the planning commission, you know, to keep the 322 and then work with city staff with the former bank and assign a
I'll agree with
address.
Counselor Mack on that. I mean, it did go through our planning commission. Yes, it could come back. A lot of things could come back at us. Yes, I'm okay with it. We've got it out to give those 2 lots addresses.
Any more discussion?
So I'll offer,
Entertain a motion.
I'll offer the motion approving with one condition, the variance request of Alliance Bank to maintain their current address of 322 North Minnesota Street at their new building location at lots 12 and 13, block 62, north of Center Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no?
No.
Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Mack,
Yes.
Counselor Schultz,
No.
Counselor Christian,
Yes.
and President Schmitz.
Yes, motion carries. Good luck. Item 5.1, oral presentation from representative from Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Sean, go ahead.
All right, thank you. All right, which button do I hit here?
F5.
All right. There we go. Presentation's ready to go. So, well, thank you. Again, my name is Shane Zart. I work with the firm Flaherty and Hood, based out of St. Paul. We work with the city in a couple of capacities, and most of you may know me from, I work with the Highway 14 partnership, but we also work with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. I see one Highway 14 button up there. So, but today, as we do in the summer following legislative sessions, we travel the state, talk to the city councils that we work with, and give kind of a quick legislative update. And I'll try to keep it as quick as possible because I know you have a work session coming up after this. So I'll try to get you out of here. So. Well, the coalition is a membership organization, as you know, and we thank the city of New Ulm for its longtime membership, but currently made up of 97 member cities across the state, with a focus on property taxes, economic development, annexation, land use, transportation, and environmental regulation, and representing cities in Greater Minnesota on those issues. So before we get into some of the specifics of the CGMC's work, want to kind of lay the groundwork because we have to step back to January, the beginning of legislative session, which feels like ages ago now. But at the time, we had a DFL governor just elected from Greater Minnesota, Southern Minnesota, in fact. A DFL House majority that had flipped into the majority, but dominated largely by suburban seats. And the Senate remained in GOP control, making Minnesota the only divided legislature. One party holds one chamber, the other holds the other chamber in the entire country. And I kind of came into it and heard a lot of this, I think, on the campaign trail, with the public desiring more transparency, less backdoor negotiation, and kind of an end to some of the acrimony that had built up between Governor Dayton and the legislature over 8 years. So the early session and some of these trends carried through to the end was kind of defined by where the budget situation sat when we came into session. Back in last November, the state's MMB, the state's Management and Budget Agency, predicted that we would have a $1.5 billion surplus. But there was kind of a bipartisan agreement that although may have a relatively large surplus, it's kind of not on shaky ground, but unreliable. A lot of it was coming from one-time sources, interactions with the federal government in the tax reform that passed at that level. And in fact, when the February forecast then came out just a few months later, it was revised down to closer to $1 billion surplus. So they were working with a surplus, but some of it I think was considered one-time money. And then the complexion of session was kind of defined by the two different parties taking two different approaches to the budget situation. I guess it maybe as tends to happen, the DFL came in and said this is a revenue problem. If we want sustainable surpluses, structural surpluses, we need to do things like raise the gas tax, ensure we have long-term, the funding is there, the revenue is there to pay for state programs. The Republicans, on the other hand, tend to view it more as a spending problem. If we want sustainable structural surpluses, we got to be spending less. And the tension between those two, and I think you heard a lot of it probably still in public statements from Senate Majority Leader Gazelka and Governor Walz, kind of carries through to today, but certainly defines session. So for the CGMC, our number one goal, and it's probably been our number one goal for about 17 years now, is to restore LGA funding to the 2002 level. And we were about sick of saying it, so thankfully we had a little success here. And a bonding bill was a priority, one that particularly fully fund wastewater programs to help cities cope with those costs. Working on the issue of childcare, which we'll touch on quickly later. Economic development through programs like the Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure Program, or BDPI, and a comprehensive transportation package, and being involved in that discussion, both so that cities would see more revenue out of whatever passed the legislature, but also so that programs like Corridors of Commerce that have been vital to highways like 14 would get funded in the end. So we start kind of with the gold medal for session, which is that we were successful in restoring LGA to the 2002 funding level. I think since it was cut, and there was actually a series of cuts after the 2002 recession, but then on forward through the economic crisis. So by 2012, I think was the low water mark, 425 million, and then we kind of every year pounded away and slowly restored it back to 564, which was where it'll be after this year's tax bill. So the gold medal we gave ourselves here is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because we're back to the 2002 level. Well, it's still just back to the 2002 level. So we're not we're still looking to the future. Still not gonna rest on LGA, but at least we get to stop talking about the 2002 level, start kind of conceptualizing the future of the program, and working towards that. And I think I want to highlight in this slide, which is just titled "Success Was Not Certain," is just kind of to thank member cities like yourselves, because when we came into session, there are certainly opportunities. I think thanks to the kind of long-time drumbeat of cities and the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, Governor Walz came in championing a LGA increase. Talked about it on the campaign trail. And then another advantage was the House Tax Chair, Paul Marquardt, longtime LGA supporter, former mayor of Dilworth, Greater Minnesota city up in the northwest part of the state. But there were also challenges. The Senate Tax Chair, not so friendly to LGA, and even the newer members from the DFL legislators from the suburbs, not necessarily hostile towards LGA, they just had preferences to focus spending on other property tax relief programs. The property tax refund program, for example, is one that has a greater impact sometimes in the suburbs, whereas LGA becomes more vital in Greater Minnesota. But it was kind of the relentless advocacy, the drumbeat that you helped us build, over the years with being active in the media, multiple action alerts, kind of not taking anything for granted, and the result at the end of the day was success. So this slide, I guess this is where the rubber meets the road, and there's a version of this too in the packet that was handed out, but is the impact of this year's bill on the city of New Ulm. So the number, the smallest column on the far left there is what New Ulm received last year, about $4.314 million. The two taller bars in the middle there are the governor's proposal and the House proposal, and the other small one there is the Senate proposal, which didn't have any LGA increase at all. So you would have seen a slight increase. That's not because new money's going into the formula, it's just because of interactions within the formula that doles that money out. And then the red bar on the far right, that's what actually happened there. And that one is a little shorter than the other two in the middle there. I can answer questions about the specifics of what's going on there. The biggest factor in there is that the tax bill that passed phases that increase in over 2 years. So we said 30 million increase, 26 of it will come this year, 4 million for the program next year. So, no matter what, as long as there's no repeal of that, you'll see an additional small bump next year. And then just some interactions within the formula where you see differences in there. But again, won't dwell on that for the sake of time. We'll answer any questions, though, if we need to. And again, I think I don't want to dwell on this slide, but this one just, looking forward, we're going to continue to work on LGA, talk about things like factoring inflation into the formula. Governor Walz actually was quoted in the paper, I think about a week and a half ago, saying that he's interested in that too. To the extent we have economic downturns on the horizon, always ready to play defense, and just watching trends at the legislature and always monitoring LGA. So I mentioned that childcare, and both in terms of availability, affordability, is something that the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities has been more and more interested in recent years, and that was kind of the result of visits like this, where we'd hear feedback from you as one of the key challenges we have is that we don't have enough childcare slots. And looking into the program, or excuse me, a lot of the state programs and the problem writ large, found that while we are seeing a greater decline in Greater Minnesota versus the Metro, where they have an affordability crisis, in Greater Minnesota we have both a availability and affordability crisis. So we worked with this session with the 6 initiative foundations across the state. A lot of the work they're already doing to train providers, recruit providers, engage with the private sector to help address the issue. And we also looked at a proposed bill for $10 million for a facilities grant program at the state level, which, we kind of talk, sometimes you'll hear the term center-based, home-based. This grant program would be focused primarily on incentivizing center-based childcare. It would be available for other purposes as well, but would provide grants to kind of cover some of the capital costs, which can be cost prohibitive to getting folks into the market, where, I haven't said this yet, but I think it's all well known. Childcare is not a high margin business, so anything can help to get it off the ground. It was an interesting issue to work on all session, because I think it was in the time that we've been talking about it, we've seen a appreciable growth in the understanding at the legislature of the problem and the distinction between Greater Minnesota and the Metro when it comes to this problem. But a lot of that was because of the success we had in getting media coverage on the issue. Had multiple legislative hearings on the bills we discussed, and then had really significant grassroots effort as well. So in the end, we didn't get everything we asked for, but advocacy paid off. We'll at least have some money to start addressing the program, or the problem. $750,000 for those initiative foundations to do that work. $750,000 for a deed program that was an existing program. Key in that, though, is that 60% of that is targeted specifically for Greater Minnesota. But that capital grant program we talked about, when the legislature failed to pass a bonding bill, that kind of went down with the ship. So we'll be back in for that one next year. But it was in the House's proposal that came forward, but ultimately didn't pass this past session. So again, I don't know how I'm doing on time here, Chris, but yeah. But I'll just kind of run quickly through this slide. But other economic development wins, it's kind of the long time stuff that we focus on every year, playing offense and defense. But some cash to keep the BDPI program moving forward. That's primarily bonding funded, so we'll be back next year for more there. There was some significant border-to-border broadband funding passed this year. Job training incentive program, some of those that help the private sector in Greater Minnesota. That's a Greater Minnesota only program, help with job training and workforce supply. And then the AIR grants, Airport Infrastructure Renewal, or AIR grant program, is a new one actually dreamt up by Senator Jasinski from over in the Faribault-Owatonna area, help incentivize business development on and around our regional airports, which is an interesting one. Brand new program, but yeah, feel free to reach out with questions about that one, because it's just getting off the ground now. I guess I didn't intend the pun there, but it worked. So we'll touch quickly on clean water funding, which has been a focus of the CGMC's, pretty heavy focus in recent years, given some of the expensive upgrades of water and wastewater treatment facilities that our cities have been facing. And we started first in 2019, much like Highway 14 for different reasons, looking back to 2018 and trying to fix what had already been done. There was a significant amount of money passed in 2018 in the bonding bill, but the funding mechanism got tied up in a lawsuit from some environmental groups that had sued the state, says you can't use those funds for those purposes. So the CGMC came in. One of our top priorities was, well, if you can't issue those bonds until that lawsuit is resolved in some way, shape, or form, we don't care where the money comes from. We just needed to get out there and making these upgrades. So helped advance a proposal and stir up some media coverage around that. At the end of the day, and this kind of ran in parallel in timing with the Highway 14 fix, but the governor legislature finally came to an agreement in March to undo what they did last year, pass new bonding, came through as GO bonds this time, so kind of rectified the funding source. Those dollars are moving forward, and I've kind of referenced the Highway 14 issue a couple times. I think folks are more familiar with that, but that was for different reasons. But a technical issue, the Highway 14 corridors of commerce bonds got tied up delayed and unable to sell those bonds for a delayed period of time. That also went in actually the same bill that these bonds got fixed in, although it kind of took a different path through the legislature. So we'll be back next year again. This hopefully being the bigger bonding year. Continue to push for at least $67 million more for those programs as the legislature moves forward, and that's the amount that the Public Facilities Authority kind of estimates we need to keep us going, to keep on pace with the state. Transportation, we'll buzz through quickly here, but the CGMC's goal, and there was a lot of talk early in session about transportation, the varied approaches. Governor Walz was proposing a gas tax on the campaign trail. Our priorities were, well, whatever you pass, we need to see at least significant funding for city streets in cities population over and under 5,000, and our long-time goal, at least $200 million in bonding for corridors of commerce, and continue to appropriate $25 million in cash. They've been doing that every year since 2017. So the House and Senate bill could not have been more different on this front. If I reference the gas tax, there are also tab fees, sales taxes that would increase in the Senate or the House bill. But from the city perspective, would have been permanent small city street funding, at least $50 million additional to spread around the state to cities over 5,000 population. So New Ulm would have seen a bump from that, and $300 million for corridors of commerce. The Senate's bill proposed no new investment in transportation over what had been done the previous session. Would have actually cut that $25 million a year cash appropriation from corridors of commerce. And had, for small city streets, had just kind of what was left on the bottom line. It was $250,000 for small cities. Nothing really additional for larger cities, but even that $250,000, once you divide it up 705 ways, would have just been about $350 for most cities on the average city in the first year. So I don't know if the engineer may know how far that goes. I don't know that. But the final deal, I think, no secret here, opportunity lost as far as a long-term transportation funding package goes. The GOP drew a red line in the sand on tax fees and increases. The DFL and Governor Walz, I think, as they would put it, they ended up talking more about the healthcare provider tax, and they kind of these two things ended up being traded off one another. They did get an extension of that healthcare provider tax, but in the horse trading, I think a bit of it was traded away for foregoing the gas tax this session from their perspective. But silver linings for us, we fended off those corridors of commerce cuts and passed, at least in the House, some historic funding for city streets. Again, that's not the version of the proposal that was signed into law, but we'll keep at it. So just quickly looking ahead, some lessons learned in 2019. first, I think just success requires persistence. So I've said we'll be back again, especially on the bonding front, a number of times, and that's one of the keys to success. We continue to navigate working with a suburban-dominated majority on the House side. We find sometimes fertile ground because they're sometimes willing to spend on critical programs, but it's often the case that some of the suburban legislators just are willing, or their first instinct is put that money into different priorities than we might have from the greater Minnesota perspective. On the flip side, the Senate GOP, sometimes more willing to support greater Minnesota specific proposals, but less willing to put significant money behind them. So that's something we continue to navigate. And having a governor, though, who comes from greater Minnesota has been key to keeping some of those things moving forward. So continuing to engage with him will be key. Looking ahead to 2020, there's been some stirring discussion of LGA formula changes, and some of that's being driven by metro area cities who don't feel they get enough. Some of it actually is being driven by some greater Minnesota cities, who I think, for more defensible reasons, that's a biased comment, but that's what I'm here for, who are bumping up against what the formula thinks they should get, and frankly, what we might think that our city should get. So we think some formula refreshing might be okay. Wary about broader changes, but to the extent that discussion happens, we're going to be at the table and making sure greater Minnesota gets a fair shake. Large bonding bill, don't need to belabor that, I already have. Transportation will still be discussed. I don't know if I expect significant movement this year, especially in an election year coming up, but we'll continue to work with legislators and as we advocate for our priorities going forward. So I'll end by just highlighting, and I realize now that I sent this one and then we made it out of date pretty quick, because this one, the Save the Date, has the summer conference we just held in Bemidji. So don't go to Bemidji, or do, but you won't find us there anymore. But that was July 24th through 26th in Bemidji, last year's summer conference. Fall conference will be 14th and 15th in Alexandria, and then Legislative Action Day, you can mark your calendars for March 11th. And then there is a Save the Date in the packet we handed out. Looks like this, that actually has the more up-to-date, the next year's summer conference. We updated this one, didn't get it in the slide in time, but and that's July 29th through 31st this year in Red Wing. We alternate those north-south. So I know Bemidji's a farther drive, but I suppose Mankato last year was easiest, but we'll work on that. But I can stand for any questions, or I can let you guys get going.
Anybody have any questions? No? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Now I'll get my screen back here. There we go. All right. Item 6.1, Herman Monument Height Retaining Wall Report and Amended Services Agreement. Dave?
Okay, John's going to help me with the presentation. Approximately a year ago, Council President Schmitz recommended that we establish a citizen committee with also some city staff members. And we became known as the Herman Heights Hillside Committee. And so what I'd like to do first off is name the members of the committee. It was Gigi Risdall, Michael Shanneman, Tom Firth, Cara Knopf, Roger Hippert, Tim Rambo, myself, Tom Schmitz, Mayor Boisman, and Councilor Schultz. Now, we also had technical assistance from City Engineer Kaler, Assistant City Engineer Stadheim, Owen Todd and Shane Trollick from Bolton and Mink, and then John Nisley also provided help. I would like to begin by talking a little bit about the history of the wall. And the Kasota Stone Wall was part of a much larger project that took place in 1970.
Mike.
Get to the mic.
What?
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. In 1970. And it was installed by Hyman Construction Company. They were a sub to Wallner Construction Company. I found it interesting to go back to 1970. The city reconstructed Center Street from Washington all the way to Camel's Back Road. They redid Garden Street from what was called School Street, which is over by Jefferson School, all the way to 3rd North. And they did it for just under $470,000. Okay, so as part of the project, we end up with what is called a gravity wall. Another term that's used to describe it is a dry wall. And what that means basically is that there's nothing in between the Casota stone. It's just laid on top of each other. If you look at this particular photograph, and this is from November 1970, you can see that the lowest wall appears to be a double wall. And then as part of the construction method that they used, they had pieces that ran parallel to Center Street and then other pieces that were perpendicular to that. And I assume that was to, you know, maintain better stability. Let's now take another look at a finished wall. So that's on the left-hand side. And you'll notice how it's, what the alignment of the wall is. And keep that picture in mind when you look at some of the pictures of the current wall. The other thing I'd like to note is on the right-hand side is a part of a drawing that we found in the plans, street plans for the project. And it shows the walls and their dimensions. And one of the things that you'll note is the use of the term batter, which I had never had heard before, but it talks, batter is the kind of the angle at which the wall is placed. And so if you look at it, you'll notice that these walls are supposed to, they were placed back into the hillside. Now, if you go up to Herman right now and look at those walls, they no longer are like this, they're like this. So that can, over time, that condition is going to change. The existing condition of the walls, you know, 50 years old. We have both surface and subsurface water-related problems. We've got active vertical and horizontal wall movement. The Casota stone is weathering and deteriorating. You know, we've got some spaces in between the walls that we have to maintain, and more recently, I would say within the past 10 years, we're starting to have problems with what we'll call blowouts. And so when you look at, remember that picture from 1970 of the alignment of the wall, and now look at those three walls in the top photograph. I mean, we're starting to bend all over the place. Go ahead. Okay, so this is, we have three photographs here. One showing some of the erosion that's taking place behind the wall. This is the blowout that took place this past spring. What was interesting about this is the blowout came from the bottom. So it must have been water pressure and it just blew it out. Actually, it also was on the end of the wall, which was kind of interesting location. We included the bottom photograph and we blew it up just to show you the deterioration and the crumbling of the Casota stone in some of these locations. And if you also look at some of the Casota stone pieces that run across, you can start to see cracking taking place. Now, this isn't a uniform condition throughout the entire wall, but we are starting to see more and more of this type of deterioration. Okay, our goals, the committee's goals in approaching this particular issue was to, first of all, provide a safe environment for park users and city maintenance staff require a minimum amount of maintenance in the retaining wall area. We wanted to complement the MLC side of Center Street, wanted to maintain the integrity of the Herman Monument area. We wanted to increase, if possible, usable park space. We wanted to provide a basic, functional, and cost-effective solution to replace the walls. Then finally, we wanted to find a wall system that would give us a minimum life of 40 to 50 years, if possible. So, the committee met starting in, or it was created in September of 2018. We met 12 times. We took a rather comprehensive approach to this issue. I think we considered anything and everything to start off with, and then started to narrow it down from there. We came up with 5 design configurations that we voted on, and from those 5, we selected 2 to present to you. And option 2 was our top choice, and if I remember correctly, option 2 had 8 votes, and the next highest one, which was option 5, had 5 votes. So option 2 was the one that was, you know, supported by the greatest number of members. This is kind of a little bit of detail on option 2. It consists of 3 retaining walls. The bottom wall would be fairly close to the sidewalk, and it would extend 460 feet. It would be a step-down wall. So it would extend from this point to here. So we're not going as far as the existing wall does. What we would do is simply take that slope, and we would remove the wall and then slope down to the existing elevation of the ground in that area. Saves us money. The lower wall would have a height of 6 feet, and it would have the turn-ins that would be identical to what you find on the MLC side. So we're trying to mirror a little bit what is there. There is then a mid-wall. That's 216 feet. We've got a 4-to-1 slope in that area, so it's a maintainable area. We have a 10-foot separation between the top of the lower wall to the mid-wall, and that's 4 feet high. The top wall would have a length of 185 feet. Again, a 4-to-1 slope. Again, it would be 10 feet from the mid-wall, and would have, again, that 4-foot wall height. Now, I think our next slide is our cost estimate, and I'll take you down to the bottom where we have a cost estimate of $461,637.50. The subtotal though is $338,250, so that's your actual construction cost. Then we have additional costs. Contingency, engineering, and landscaping. One of the areas in which we save some money is our landscaping is $5,000. You may remember a year ago when we were looking at the estimates, landscaping was around $150,000. We also believe that we're going to be able to save money with the engineering, staking, administration, or soft costs. We've got 84.5 there. I think we're going to be able to save 20 to 30,000 in that particular category. We're going to be able also to save a little bit of money with the landscaping, and we also have got a contingency of 34,000 approximately. Hopefully, we can save a few dollars there as well. Okay, this is the second choice, option 5. Option 5 is identical to option 2, with the exception that the length of the lower wall now extends to 650 feet. In option 2 is 460 feet. So that's 190 more feet. And if you go to the cost estimate, what you'll find is that we're now at $573,080, which is $111,000 more, and it directly relates to the amount of wall area that you have. The more wall area, the higher the cost. Okay, so now just a little bit about the materials and the plantings that we would recommend. This is the block that was selected. It's a bevel block with a color that's close to match the existing Casota stone. I think we had a lot of discussion about this particular topic. So we had, it was kind of pretty close as far as the color and the type of block to use. The next page shows the planting areas. So we got 3 planting areas. We have different colors, but we're proposing to use the same planting plan for each level. And so what we would have would be evergreen shrubs on the ends, and that would kind of serve as a type of vegetation that would be high enough to hopefully keep people out of the planting areas. And then within, from the 2 ends, we would have wildflower plantings. And then on the edge of each of the wall, we would go with a geranium or phyllox that would kind of be along the edge to kind of soften that appearance. This shows you know, the types of plantings that we would go with. There would be 36 different types of wildflowers, and there would be 7 different types of grasses within that that upper area. So we think it's something that would provide some color and would be a nice addition to the hillside. We have 3 recommendations for you, and I should say this is a combination of recommendations from the committee, but also some staff recommendations. Recommendation number 1 is install option 2 with a beveled face block and color similar to the existing Casota stone with wildflower plantings behind the walls. Recommendation number 2 is that we bid and construct the new retaining walls and the new parking lot together with separate cost accounting. And this is something that can be easily accomplished. Recommendation number 3 is that we amend the current Bolton Inc. contract for the Herman Heights Renew improvements to include the retaining wall as part of their project work. And in the attachment, or there is an attachment in the agenda in which a cost for that work is provided, and that's $52,000. I would note that the design and the preparation of plans and specifications and taking us through bidding would cost approximately I believe it's $39,000. So the other $13,000 would be for staking and for inspection services. And what we tried to do was to mirror the services that Bolton Inc. was providing for the Renew project to get the same services for the retaining wall project. Okay, potential schedule. Do plans and specifications this fall and winter. bid opening in February of 2020. Construction start on April 1, 2020. And substantial project completion by August 31st of 2020, with hopefully limited impact on the next Herman Fest activity. Okay, so the next question is, got a $450,000 project, and how are you gonna pay for it? And what would propose is that, you know, there are some options there. Originally, there was $200,000 set aside in the Park and Recreation Department fund balance to pay for the retaining wall project. Other sources of income would be the 2020 city budget. We could take it out of the city general fund balance. We could include it in the 2020 capital improvement program. Or we could kind of do a combination where we're maybe taking a piece here and a piece there and come up with maybe an additional $250,000. That's kind of the dollar amount that we're probably looking at. That's it.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate all the work the committee put in, and I like what you came up with. I think it's a great plan. I think what we as the city council need to do now is get off the pot and get going. I think, you know, because it has to be done. There's not a question. And we're at the right time of the year. We're doing budgets and everything else. And I think the comment you made at the end there about maybe a little bit here and a little bit there from different pots, I think we can make it go. And I think basically is kind of give the nod, let's go. I like the plan. I like what I see. And like I said, I think you guys did a great job. Appreciate it.
Mr. President, I just wanted to first thank Dave for agreeing to chair this committee. This was made up of a group of people that had a lot of opinions, and we voiced them. And I appreciate that. There was a lot of hard work from city staff that brought us information, and the people on the committee looked at so many different things, as Dave talked about. We talked about Artstone. We talked about all the different possibilities and keeping the Kasota Stone and what else could we do. But we took it seriously, and people were there. They participated. They got involved. And this is what we came up with. And I want to thank the city staff and the committee members for their hard work on this project. And you gave us a task. We were at 700,000, almost 800, when we were like, whoa, we can't pay that much. That's crazy. And then we created this committee to come up with a more sensible approach. And I think it worked. So
I think it did a great job, yeah.
and I agree with you. I like the idea of a combination of different, we got the budget coming up. We can figure out a portion of it could come out of that. We already have the 200 from previous. And then maybe figure out what we want to do for bonding and stuff. So I think we can get this figured out.
I guess I'm gonna chime in a little bit. Do we have any concerns? Because now we're not gonna go as far at the original wall, that the hillside's not gonna erode or any more. The engineers feel from the two options. You know, can you touch on that? You know, if we're gonna remove material and.
Mr. President and City Council, I do not, in the area where we're not showing reconstructing that wall, it's probably only about a 3-foot elevation change, and we can slope that back quite easily. I would think we would probably plan on having some subsurface drainage tile in case there's additional water that comes out of that hillside. But if you remember originally, the first plan was to slope the entire area back. And unfortunately, that took up some of the usable park space. So that was one of the reasons we tried to rebuild a wall. But no, I do not have a concern with regard to not extending that down to Summit.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not going to come back and have to add more wall in at a later date, you know, just, you know, on that aspect. So.
Well, I think Bolton and Mink were pretty firm that this would work.
Yeah.
Besides our good people, but I'm comfortable because we went outside, not only our people, but brought some other people in from the outside. And
So Dave, part of the recommendation or the proposal is this additional 52,250. Where would we take that from? Out of that 200,000 maybe?
Yeah, that would,
That'd make
that'd
no
be a
sense.
logical starting point.
That was my question also. We got 461 for this project, but now we add the 52,000 in also, so we're at
No,
510.
that's part of the.
That is part of the
Yeah.
engineer, okay.
And
Matter of
potentially it
fact-
could be 30,000 less because there's a contingency of 33 in there,
I
so.
wouldn't bank on that.
Well, yeah, we know how that goes, right?
Mhm. All right, thank
But
you.
I think we need to move forward with it and keep going.
Yep.
I'm gonna, since I have served on this committee, and again, thank you to everybody, I'm gonna offer the proposed action to receive the Herman Heights Hillside Committee report, ordered filed, and approve amendment number 1 to the professional service contract with Bolton and Mink for the Herman Heights Park Renew project to add design, bidding, and construction observation services for the Herman Heights Hillside retaining wall at a cost not to exceed 52,250. And I think our president was right. This is a good time to do it when we're working on the Renew projects, to work them all together at the same time. I know we'll save some money doing that, so. That's my
Second.
motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes.
with that motion, technically you're not approving
Right, it's just,
the plan.
We're not
We're just-
approving the plan.
Is
Get
that
Bolton
gonna
and Mink.
happen at a
Do we want that maybe at this?
secondary meeting? I mean, we wanna move ahead with the plan, at least that's
Not
what I
on the
hear the
agenda,
council
technically.
say.
Not on the agenda.
No.
it's
We
just
could put it
a,
on the agenda for next time, but I think we,
Yeah, then they'll
We're-
know what to bid. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, we need to
Yeah,
have
we have
the
to-
engineer move ahead with the plan that the council, selects.
So should I amend my motion to approve option 2?
I would have to defer to the attorney, it's not on the agenda, maybe it has to come back. I would suggest
But I
that.
think.
Well, I think
yeah.
it could be interpreted as part of the
Yeah,
scope if you're,
okay.
otherwise what are you amending the professional service contract to
Right.
do?
Okay,
You have to have some explanation of it, and if it's
Yeah.
I'll
to
amend my motion
implement,
to that then.
yeah, option 2.
You got it.
second.
okay. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. New business, Green Mill Best Western Plus Oktoberfest event. That's for October 4th through the 5th and 11th through the 12th.
I'll move it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll go to item 7.4, set a public hearing on the reinvestment.
Sorry, Charlie,
Wait,
part of that
wait,
last
that
one
was a resolution.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Gotta redo that.
Let's start over. We have a motion and a second off the resolution, waived reading. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Mack,
Yes.
Counselor Schultz.
Yes.
Counselor Christian.
Yes,
President Schmitz.
Yes, motion carries. All right, now we'll go on to item 7.4, set a public hearing for the reassessment of unpaid Lakeside Village addition for 2005 special assessments. Anything on that, or I think that's pretty much.
Sir
routine.
President, we have, three, tax forfeited parcels that were sold out in this subdivision, and previously the city council, approved a methodology to recoup these special assessments, and in order to do that, we need to set the public hearing and move forward with that.
Thank you. The public hearing date is, let's see, for September 17th, 2019 at 4:30 PM.
I'll move it.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 7.5 from Brown County Agricultural Society requesting standby services, and that's for the fire department for the Brown County Free Fair for August 9th, 2019 for the tractor pull.
Before motion to approve it, I've got a question for the city attorney. I asked this many years ago when I was a chief. Does the chief have to come in front of the city council when they go out to the Lions Fly-In, the Flying Dutchman Hill Climb, serving at the Brown County Fair? Do they have to come in front of the city council for permission every time, or can that be up to the chief's discretion? I mean, just a question.
Well, I think I don't know if the fire department, do they get paid for being on standby? Chief?
Usually what happens is they make a donation to the fire department. There's nothing paid or a contract or anything.
Okay. I think it might be different if the event is happening on city property like the airport as opposed to the agricultural society's property.
Okay.
Or if it's the Dutchman Club for a race or something like that, if they'd want you out there.
Counselors, I think the only two events that they ask us to do that are on city property would be the fireworks and
The Herman Fest.
yeah. And what's the other one? We were just
Airport,
the
Lions
airport
Lion.
one. Yep. And otherwise, the other ones are all on either county or private property.
So they give you a donation, we don't charge them or anything?
No.
Okay.
So in other words, it just
I think
should
it's a matter
continue.
of, it's a matter of course where we're using city resources for an event that's not on city
Okay.
property, and that's probably why they'd like to have the council approve it.
All right.
So with that, you can offer a
With
motion.
that, yeah, I'll approve the request for the Brown County Ag Society for the tractor pull August 9th, 2019.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 8.1, a report of claims. A report of claims paid in the amount of $2,044,317.26, and a list of claims to be paid in the amount of $1,625,307.04.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. This time, we'll go into an addendum. So I
I'll
still
offer a
need
motion to suspend the rules to take up the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. National Window request to replace container curbside. Chris?
Excuse me. So this is for the middle school project. They're requesting 40-foot containers to be placed on First North and North State Street from August 7th to December 31st to store windows. And so since it's over the 14-day limit, it does need council approval.
Okay, thank you.
I do know there's a lot of county employee parking exactly at that location, but we know we are going to be losing it. It's been in an empty building for 10 years, so employees have parked along the side of the school, not on the side of the Lind House. But, so I looked at that, I went, oh, okay. But we've already kind of had to restructure anyway because of the businesses that are going in there, or the construction people that are in and out of the school, but I'm gonna move it. It needs to happen.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. With no more business, meeting adjourned.